All right. I want to get into this. Usually I do one of these intros. You hear the music and we go and go. But this time, because there's so much wackiness that this guy has been through, I'm talking about none other than the world class maniac himself. I'm talking about Eric Young, a guy who has been, listen, I could spend an entire hour just running down the alone, let alone fishing with sharks while in an inner tube. It's wild. This guy's life is unbelievable. So I want to get right into it. First of all, Eric, thank you so much for joining me, brother. How you been?
Yeah, pleasure. And I mean, live action wrestling, like taking me back to the old school, man. I think that's how me and you first met. And I know for sure that's how I met Jeff Merrick, who's still a very good buddy of mine. And when I tell people that's, what he started doing, well, years ago, people are like, no, he's been a hockey host forever. It's like, yeah, but before that,
Right?
when,
Yeah.
when
Yeah, exactly.
podcasting wasn't a thing, you guys were doing it. So
Because you were already training out at Waldo Von Erich's place and some other guy, I forget his name. And you were already doing your thing, and we came out there to do some promo stuff for them. And and so let's fast forward that a little bit, because that is where we met, and we kind of broke in right around the same time. But then you went and you left there and started your own facility, your own training. I don't want to call it a school, because you weren't really running a school. It was called WrestlePlex. It was right down the damn street from where you were. Run me through that. Why did you do that in the first place?
The number one reason was I was backing down on independent shows. I was in a place where, like, I was, often one of the better guys on the show, and working these shows for $40 and wrestling people I don't know and risking injury. Like, I mean, that was a time in my life where I was basically invincible, but I certainly didn't want to get hurt making no money and not getting better. And it was just a way for me to have a ring so I could be in the ring several times a week. It's something that I think I've always been passionate about, and kind of passing that knowledge. And I don't even know if at that point I was good enough to even run a wrestling school, but I had very good success. It wasn't around for a long period of time, but I mean, as a lot of people know, trained Sean Spears, Ty Dillinger, whatever you want to call him, trained Crazy Steve, trained Jake O'Reilly, trained a bunch of people, Chris Chambers and Ashley Six and Mike Petticombe, and a bunch of guys that are still doing it, and doing it at a high level independently as well. So for me, it was just to have a ring. I liked doing it. And I was backing down on shows, but wanted to be crisp because I was doing a bunch of tryouts with the WWF, WWE at the time, and TNA wrestling, and just I didn't want to get rusty, but I certainly didn't want to work some 300-pound slob that doesn't know what he's doing and have him drop me onto my head or get hurt doing something like that. So,
like me.
Well, I mean, you may have been close to 300 pounds, but you certainly weren't a slob.
So you open up this place and you're doing these tryouts, and then all of a sudden you're like, you know what? F the world. I'm moving to the States. And you did it in a weird, like, old school way, because does it still happen where it's like, I'm going to go to the States and I'm going to find somebody down there that can help me out, right? Walk me through.
So I think it does happen. It is a crazy story. And I mean, I got a lot of crazy stories, but it's a really wild one. And I think when I tell people it sounds made up, but I was dating one of the cage dancers from TNA wrestling. I had done a bunch of independents down here in Tennessee, and had done a couple of tryouts that we kind of met through other people, and we were chatting on the phone and hanging out. And when I would come down to Nashville, I'd hang out with her, and she traveled sometimes for work and would come up to Detroit, and I'd go over and see her. And we certainly weren't at a place where we were going to be married. And it started as a joke from her. And, why don't you just marry me, and then you can be down here, kind of full time. And, and then 3 months later, I walked with picture perfect Marco Malachias to Scotia Bank and sold my house to him for $1, closed my wrestling school, quit my job, packed my wrestling gear and some of my clothes in my car, and moved to the United States and left everything. So, I mean, I'm sitting here and had a very successful run and got a couple of good years left, I think, and all worth it. But I mean, there was no guarantee. Like, I know that TNA was interested. The WWF at the time and WWE was interested. And I was just trying to make it easier for them to say yes. So
And so it ends up that you end up signing with TNA first, that first run, whatever, right? And that was, if I'm not mistaken, that was Jeff Jarrett era.
yep. Yep.
Your relationship with Jeff, how did that hit off? Because I know some stories already, but it was a good dream.
Yeah, very, very good. We kind of hit it off right away. We're very close friends right away. We're still very friendly today and talk, and not like we did, but like I would spend hours with him in the hospital when his wife Joe was passing away, and just being around to be around him and be around his kids and stuff like that. So we're very close at one point. But yeah, I mean, obviously Scott D'Amore had a lot to do with that as well. He was a producer there and kind of stuck his neck out for me. And nobody makes it, without someone going to bat for you. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, it's just the reality. It's a who knows you and who you know kind of business, and that will never change. So having people on my side that way was great. But yeah, me and Jeff hit it off great right away. Mike Today was a huge part of the writing group, and Vince Russo. Who guys I still talk to this day, not as often as we probably should or as I'd like, but yeah, still very friendly with them.
Now it's funny you say it, because I've always said the same thing. It's not necessarily who you know or who knows you. It's who's willing to say they know
Right.
you.
Yeah.
That's really the big thing, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
So TNA, you have a huge run. You end up doing some of the craziest stuff just in TNA alone on this first run, right? Like, you were Super Eric.
Yeah.
You were hunting for Elvis at some point. Too Many Concussions, handicap character, all of these comedy characters that you were doing. Was that always something like in your mind? I think I know the answer, but I want to hear, like, is that always something in your mind that you wanted to do?
No. I mean, I think you know me well enough. And like there was lots of guys in Ontario at the time when I was breaking in that were very good. But if I wasn't one of, if not the best guy in Ontario at the time, I mean, you could point him out to me. And I'm not trying to toot my horn. I mean, I'm not good at anything. I barely made it here on time, but I mean, pro wrestling, I've always been able to do, and I've been good at it right away. I was good at it. It's the only time in my life I can say I was good at something right away. And luckily it was this thing that I loved the most. And the truth is I wanted to have a gimmick and a character. And my gimmick at the time was I said 0 words and I was from Canada. Right. That's not a gimmick. That's nonsense. It was a very good gateway for me to get in. Obviously, working with 4 or 5 of your best friends, guys that you trust with your life, and guys that are uber talented. You know what I mean? Like, there was no way that wasn't going to get over. There's just no way. Think of the talent there. Petey Williams, Bobby Roode, Johnny Devine, A1, Ruffy Silverstein was part of it. Scott D'Amore, right? It's incredible the amount of talent that we had just in that small amount of time. But yeah, I mean, the comedy thing just kind of came around. I do seminars now, and I tell people, like, I had never done comedy wrestling once, ever, anywhere.
Right.
For any promotion that I had ever worked for anywhere.
Yeah.
And I always tell people, like, whatever it is that they're asking you to do it, and do it the best you can do, because it makes you invaluable. Like, I'm not the best in any one thing, but I've proven over a long period of time that I'm very good at a lot of it. And I think that's why I'm still, a big part of the show today, and have been a big part of the show for 20 plus years. I mean, that's maybe the thing I'm most proud of is longevity. Like, that you can see, like, these NHL kind of half symbols. I do a podcast, and like, nothing is more celebrated by pro players than when they get to 1,000 games.
Right.
Because it's hard. Like, being very good for 6 months is cool. Being very good for 6 years is impossible.
Right.
And I think I've proven that. But yeah, I mean, the comedy stuff just kind of came by, and they said, this is kind of what we want you to do. And I just said, all right. And I let it rip, and I just jumped into it all the way.
I think Jaromir Jagr is a perfect example of a guy who just does not know when to quit. I mean, it's the one thing keeping him out of the Hall of Fame right now. still playing, coaching and
Yeah.
playing. And he's
Yeah.
like, screw the Hall of Fame. I'm going to keep playing until I can't play no more. And then you can put me in the Hall of Fame. Like, who gives a right?
Because he's going straight in, right? Like, I mean, it's undeniable. And
Yeah.
I mean, for him, like, obviously, it's the Hall of Fame has always been a thing for him. He's probably, 6 years into his career, everyone knew he was going to be in the Hall of Fame. He's one of the best players to ever play in the NHL. He was a dominant player in 3 different eras. I mean, it's incredible. But yeah, I mean, the comedy stuff, the truth is I really fell in love with it. Yeah. And I really enjoyed doing it. And, it was able to open all these other doors. I got this crazy fishing show and the show and travel channel. And then by hosting those, I've got this new show that's going to come out in October about vinyl records. So, I would say you just never know what it's going to do or what kind of door it's going to open. So, like, if you believe my plan was to play a mentally handicapped person on television for 8 years, I've got some property on the moon to sell you, right? Like,
right.
Of course, I wanted to be Shawn Michaels, and that wasn't available to me. I look like this, so that was never going to be available to me. And the faster I was able to realize that and fill this role doing this other thing and start traveling the world and making money doing the thing I love, it was better for me, And a lot of people, I think, looking back on it, questioned it, and a lot of guys where we broke in Ontario, like, man, like, is it cool? Like, do you like it? Like, you're kind of a joke. And I was like, I'm being paid to be on television, and I don't care what it is.
I think it's one amazing. Of those. I think it's one of those things where a lot of people take wrestling too serious. Right. At the end of the day, it's professional wrestling. It's sports and entertainment. It's both of them. Our job is to act and emote and cause the people that are watching it to emote along with us. So if you can't be funny, if you can't be serious, if you can't learn to cry, if you can't learn to be mad, you're going to be stuck in a rut. Right. And you 100%. found a way to get out of that very, very, very quickly and very well at that. Was there, because I mean, we're talking about a beer drinking contest. We're talking about a TNA Knockouts Tag Team Champion, talking about a wedding on air, all of this, like, you name it, you name the gimmick, as crazy as it might be. I can do 6 degrees of separation with Eric Young. No doubt about it. Right.
Yeah.
Was there one of your most fun ones? Like, buying condoms in a convenience store, wrestling CeeLo Green. CeeLo Brown. Was there a favorite one for you?
Me and him still joke about that. Like, it wasn't a plan. Like, I think The Voice was very popular at the time, and he was like a huge character on that show. And I love those shows. I don't care how cheesy or weird that makes me. I love them. And I just kind of said it. A lot of that stuff. Improv is something that I've always loved, and it's obviously a huge thing in pro wrestling. And doing that, like, eventually, after about a year, they understood that I got the assignment, and they didn't have to write for me. Or they just said, "You'll just show up and just do what you do," and I was allowed to do whatever I wanted. And like, that's a rad job to have, man. Like, working with ODB was obviously amazing. She's so cool and so talented and was so over, and just, we had this really cool chemistry, and that wedding was one that I think people still talk about today. It was just special, man. A lot of that stuff, like doing the weird promos with Steiner, those videos pop up, and like, I'm just trying to get him to crack, like, of all people, like him and Angle were the 2 guys that I couldn't wait for them to say, go ahead, and just try to get him to crack on screen. So if I make them laugh, I can make anyone laugh. Oh, I got them both over several different times. Yeah. There's a really famous Scott Steiner one where I'm like flexing my traps or something. I don't know. He tells me I look terrible. I was like, I don't look terrible. And then, like, I'm going in and out of the door. We're just improvising it. And he breaks. Like, you can hear it. He kind of starts to laugh, and then he pretends to be mad. Got along really well. So yeah, it was like a really cool time in my career, and I loved it. But I mean, the most special, I think, the ODB stuff was just special. Like, you just knew it doing it, and part of that was, like, I was kind of over, but she was crazy over. Yeah, like crazy over. House shows were out of control. Like, man, it was awesome.
So your first run of TNA, how hard? I mean, obviously, adoration. You love being there. How hard was it for you to make the decision to leave that first time?
Yeah, it was both times that I left, it was hard. You know, the
Well,
first
we'll
one
get it. We'll
was,
get into the second one in a minute
yeah,
here.
the first one was difficult because it was all I knew, right? Like that's where I became who I was in the wrestling world. It's where I grew up. It's where I became a man, and you know, it's where I was working when I met my wife, and all of these things, all these milestones. I was world champion and tag champion and ex champion and women's tag champion and you know, global champion and TV champion and all. I mean, all of it. So it's all of my firsts were done there, and that's you know, there's a lot to say that. It was just kind of like I felt at the time. One, the WWE, WWF was always my goal. Like TNA didn't exist when I started really training and whatever. It didn't come around until years later. So it was never on the radar. Obviously, when it opened, it was like, man, it's another place for me to go and get on TV and say that I do this for a living. So it became a real thing after it started becoming, you know, a real product. But WWE was always the goal. And, you know, illegally or legally, I don't know, they pursued me. And it just was, the truth is, I think, you know, financially, I probably took a pay cut to go to NXT, which is a wild thing to say. Because I think me, Bobby, Joe, Austin Aries, and Drew McIntyre were the highest paid guys there at the time. But I was doing very well at Impact at the time. And also being able to do independence and kind of do whatever I want. But, you know, it was a bet on yourself. And plus, like, that was a goal that I wanted to check off of my list. You know, that was really my only goal when I first started, was to work for the WWF. And yeah, I mean, it was definitely was not an easy decision. But at that time, how it was being run and these groups of tapings, it was grueling, and the numbers were dwindling, and we were being moved around on television from Spike to Destination America. You know, there's no hit on anybody that was there or running it or Dixie or any of that thing. It just was time for me to go. And that doesn't mean that it was easy, because that was my home, you know, and all the people I knew and you know, was close to basically work there. So, but, you know, it was a big deal being able to go over there with Bobby Roode at the same time. Obviously knew Drew pretty well, was very close with Joe and with Austin Aries. So all of us going at the same time was kind of a cool thing. And at the time, like, there was nothing hotter in the wrestling world than NXT, nothing. Yeah. So, you know, you're stepping into this just unbelievable opportunity.
Did you feel like the writing was on the wall with TNA at the time? Like that, you know what I mean? You could see what's happening. Like, I'm getting out of here before there's nothing left to get out of here from.
Yeah, that was part of it. You know, part of it was like I had kind of done everything, you know, and I wasn't going to miss an opportunity to check this other thing off my box, you know, off my list. And obviously, you know, I was ready to work there. But after meeting with Hunter the first day, I knew that I wanted to work for him. I mean, the minute 10 minutes into the conversation, like, you know, and still to this day, I was talking to him last week, you know, and we're still friends, still friendly. And there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes with both companies right now, which is super cool. And it's cool to kind of be part of that. And just being a buddy with him is cool. But he's a guy that, like, I'd run through a wall for him. I owe him a lot. And he always was honest with me, even when I didn't want to hear it. And I appreciate that. And yeah, it was time for me to go. And the time was right, and the stars aligned, and it was the right decision in every way, shape, and form at the time.
So you go there, you end up in a faction doing the Sanity thing, killer run in NXT, right? And like the goal for everybody, it seems like, get moved up, get called up to SmackDown and Raw. And that's the thing, but they didn't call everybody up.
Yep.
Right? Why was that? First of all, I was always curious.
Well, I mean, there's only so much room, right? And I mean, they've employed hundreds of people that you will never see or hear, right? Maybe thousands at this point. And at the time, like NXT, like I said, it was, you know, like Adam Cole and, you know, Andrade and Gargano and Ciampa and Bobby Roode and Shinsuke and Joe. And, like, I mean, it's the Mecca. Yeah. Those tickets sold out instantaneously. Obviously there's not 90,000 people at them. They're working at the arena in Barclays, or they're at the Orlando Magic Arena in Orlando, or wherever Mania or SummerSlam or whatever happened to be. But those tickets sold out first. I mean, they were the hottest ticket in pro wrestling to get. And being on those shows there was something special there. And I think you're starting to see that again there, which is great for wrestling. It's great for wrestlers and great for the WWE. And when the WWE does well, surprise, everybody does well. It's just how it goes. The tide raises all boats. But the sanity thing I loved. It was, after talking with Hunter, as he saw me cut this promo. I was feuding with Bobby Roode at the time, and I was a heel, and I'm screaming and like spit's flying out of my mouth. And he was like, sanity had been kind of this idea that he'd been sitting on. And he said, that's the guy that I want to lead this group. And that was like a huge honor for me. One, I mean, the fact that he watched it all, right? I mean, one of the busiest human beings on earth, but in the end, that's part of his job, to know. And he knew, and they hired me, and right away was in such a cool position. And, one of my favorite wrestling memories is, I mean, there's no secret. I'm, a massive Shawn Michaels guy. I was writing articles at the time for ESPN, and I wrote an article about my love for him and how our lives intersected. And he has no idea that it happened, but I'm very, very memorable for me. And one of my very first pay-per-views, I was wrestling Sean Spears, a kid I trained in San Antonio, and our producer for that match was Shawn Michaels, and he almost cried. He liked it so much, and that's insane, right? It's just insane. So being able to work with him and work, really hands-on with the music and the entrance and the feel of it, and they let me say how things that they wanted said my own way, and was just treated with complete respect by Triple H and by everybody there, and I loved it. And the truth is, I didn't really want to leave, but that was the goal, right? The goal was to go to the main roster.
Right. Now, do you think sanity ran its course, or did something stop it?
No. Well, I mean, I'm not a gambling person, but if there's only one person on earth that didn't get it, and that was the only person that mattered. So
right.
That was the bridge we crossed, and we found out the hard way. And people are like, are you mad? Are you bitter? Like, I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed in how that went. All my blood and sweat and tears of my life was poured into that. A lot of hard work by everybody in Sanity, Axel and Damo and Nikki and Fulton and, everybody. And the people that we worked with worked really hard to make this a real thing, like tag team of the year, match of the year. Like, it was red hot. I mean, red hot. And they just dropped the ball. And I always say, I'm not the first person he's missed on, and I certainly won't be the last. And Kenny Omega didn't last 8 months. He's one of the best to ever do it, period, the end. So, right. It's an unfortunate truth. And in the end, it came down to one person didn't understand it. And that's the only person that mattered at the time.
And for those of you that don't know, we're obviously talking about Vince, right? The guy who just
I'm not allowed to say his name.
I know. I don't. I can say.
Come out. Say whatever you want.
I got a stack of letters from people telling me to shut up. It doesn't stop me. And which has got to be, it's got to be very disheartening, because you grow up as a kid, right? And you're like, this is the company I want to work for. This is the guy I want to work for. You hear from everybody in the company. Hunter himself gives you this gold idea. And then you find out that the god of wrestling, so to speak, right? The guy who has the hammer on everything, right? Doesn't get it. Like, does that just rip everything right out of you? Oh, you're muted.
For what you do, it was hard to get excited to go to work, because I wasn't working. I wasn't doing anything. And, a lot of people will say, but you were making money. And I was, and that's because of Hunter. I was making life-altering money, life-altering. And, but I never got into wrestling thinking about making money, or even thinking about being on TV, which, looking back on it now as a 40-something-year-old, like, that's insane. Right. It's insane to not have that thought and be like, the only thought was, this is what I love, and I want to do it for a living, whatever that may be. And money's great. There's no doubt about it. it certainly does not buy you happiness, but it does make it a lot easier.
Right.
But I mean, the truth is, it's a sour pill. But I think for part of it for me is like I have become something somewhere else. I didn't need him to tell me I'm good because I'm good at it.
Yeah.
Everyone else can see it. He just couldn't for whatever reason. And I don't know. And nobody will ever know. He might know, and he might even remember. I don't know, but he just decided. And it was obviously it sucked. And then COVID comes, and you get fired, and you're unemployed for the first time since you were 14, and it's wild. I mean, technically, I was never unemployed, but the illusion of unemployment.
Absolutely. And then you end up going back. Like obviously, you're fired. There's some free agency stuff going around. You end up going back to TNA. Obviously, the return was very amicable. There was no problems or anything like that. And you start up a whole new faction, right? You start up the Violent by Design faction with Cody and Joe Doring. And what was that your idea? Was that somebody else's?
No, I think me and Scott had kind of talked about there being a group, and there was a bunch of ideas thrown around. At first, I was just kind of on my own. I mean, I kind of like came out in a babyface way, but this is during COVID, so there's no fans. So, I mean, it was a wild time for everybody. And but by the end of the match, I turned into a heel, and then I kind of go on this pretty dominant run. I end up beating Eddie Edwards for the world title, and then I have the belt for almost, at least 6 months, maybe closer to 9 months, and then end up dropping it to Rich. But in between that time, kind of surrounding myself with these like-minded people, and Big Joe Doring was always going to be in the group. A guy that I've known forever. I never worked closely with, but a guy that I absolutely love, and I don't know if he even watches or hears any of this, and just know I love you, man, and hope you're feeling better. And obviously Cody Deaner, a person I've known for over 25 years, and I wanted him in the group. He was kind of languishing, and I thought there was this really kind of cool full circle storytelling where like Eric Young could see himself in Cody. He's this comedy guy, being bullied and pushed around, but he's really this other thing that I know, because I broke in with him in Ontario. In Ontario, he's one of the top guys. I mean, he's Scott world champion for River City, right? I mean, he's this other thing everywhere else except for TNA. So it's this kind of like cool real life, but not real life story where we know each other, and I see myself in him and want to rescue him from being ordinary kind of thing. And and Violent by Design was obviously very involved with all of it, the promos and the imagery, and through Robert, the one of the writers here who I worked with Insanity at NXT, and Eric Tompkins, the head of production here, who he's just a god, right? Just a wizard at what he does. And Scott was very good at putting people in positions and saying, this is what you're good at, so do these things. And that's, from top to bottom at TNA Wrestling, right? There's not a lot of us, and there's probably lots of people being underpaid and overworked. But the truth is it looks as good as it is, and is as well received as it is, because there's all these hardworking, brilliant people working to put it together. And the Violent by Design thing, I think it's a bold statement, and it's pretty recent, but I would say it's probably my favorite time in my career.
Even after you got murdered?
Even after I got murdered, I got to come back, and there was nothing cooler than that.
Yeah. See, okay, let's talk about this God complex bullshit, right? Because clearly, that's the only person that gets to get murdered and come back, right? I want to know whose idea it is to kill everybody off in TNA, and whose was it to murder you?
It's happened several times, right? Like, I'm certainly not the only one.
How come nobody's called to the office or called to the police station? There's a lot of wrestlers dying in TNA, bro.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. The murder does seem to be a real problem there. But it's, I think it was kind of a brainchild of Eric Tompkins, is how he kind of, how it ended is we're shooting in this like kind of jailhouse set where we shot a lot of the promos, and Cody definitely, like, there's the illusion. One, you can't show him stabbing me because it's cable television.
Yeah.
And also, there's no thought or even thought or idea that I'm going to come back, right? Like, I'm leaving. I've signed this 4-year deal, and that's going to be it, right? Kind of thing. But they still leave it open-ended because he's an artist, I guess. I don't know. I don't have the forethought, to be honest.
Right.
But when I said, I think that this is happening and I'm coming back, and he goes, oh, we can do this and we can do that. And just, he had it in his head before I'd even signed my name on a contract. So it's, I've talked about him 100 times, but people aren't talking about Eric Tompkins enough in the pro wrestling world. I mean, they're just not. He's one of the best at what he does. He is a great dude, a great human being, a good father, a good husband, good friend, but most of all, loves pro wrestling and cares about it with his entire soul. And you can see it, like, he's doing stuff with little to no money, right? Like, they just don't have the resources. They don't have the staff. They don't have any of that. He's doing it all himself, him and a small army of other people, but it's he's the head of production there, and I believe the show is as good as it is solely because of him.
I think that, like, it was probably one of the most cinematic spots, like programs that you'd see outside of big budget. You know what I mean? We're talking $1 million budget stuff. And so that was very cool. It was even cooler to me. It was like, I know these two assholes. They're just fun, right? So
100% having the best time. And it's, I think it was a conscious decision. Like, Scott, me and him for sure talked about it. Me and Tompkins talked about it. Me and Cody and Joe talked about it. We didn't want VBD to feel like other things. We didn't want it to even really feel like pro wrestling. And like, us standing on the set or, like in a locker room always felt awkward. And we tried to avoid it. I mean, there was a few times where we did it, but very, very few. And I mean, that kind of stuff I love. I'm just addicted to it. The verbiage, the tail end of that one where I come back to life and I like crawl out of that room and I get on my motorcycle and I'm riding, and there's that voiceover, and it's like very Sons of Anarchy, very artistic. They let me write that, right? And that's personal investment. I'm not a writer by any means, but getting the respect to write that and allowing me to write it. And those are my words, every single one of them. And it just makes you more invested in what you're doing. And I think that's the beauty of working for TNA Wrestling. Well,
it makes you feel utilized and special. It makes you 100%. Feel like your voice, your opinion, it actually matters to somebody, right?
Yep.
But then you decided to get murdered and forego all of that and decide to go back to the stupid ex-girlfriend, so to speak, right? Yeah. For whatever reason. When you were down there the second time, did you even work?
I didn't. No, I actually never left my house. The whole story's wild. Again, I had to sign an NDA.
Absolutely.
And I'm not allowed to say names.
Now, is your NDA as clad as Janelle Grant's NDA?
I think, I don't know. I mean, I think, it depends if it goes federal or not. I mean,
right.
I might be able to say everything here within a few months, but the truth is as I don't need to talk badly on it. Like, it is what it is. And I talked to Hunter, and he hired me back and wanted me back there. And I was, and another person came back, and I won't work for that person. I won't be around that person. And I said that when I left there the first time when I got fired, and I meant it. And, for me, there's tons of professional reasons, but mostly it's a personal and moral decision. Is I don't have to be there. I have a very good life outside of there. And there's no doubt it's the pinnacle of sports entertainment. There's no, like we just saw this weekend. I mean, I don't know if it could be more perfect, to be honest. It's the big fish in the pond, and no one will say that. I will never change my mind on it. That was my goal. I did. I went there and I had a bunch of cool things. I was hired back there to do something very cool, and it just didn't work out. And in the end, I was going to be forced to compromise who I am as a person and as a man. And I'm not willing to do that. And it's not lost on me that I was able to make that choice, because a lot of people aren't going to get that choice, right? You're going to make decisions and you're going to be forced to do what you got to do. If this was 10 or 15 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to make that choice.
Well, that's what I was going to say. That's what I was going to say, is like, if you were still early on in your career, it wouldn't have even been an option. But we're talking, this is after you've gotten TV shows on Discovery, after you've done, you've gone back and forth, you've cemented yourself, you've got a foot in the business, right? Yeah. Do you think that not enough people live off of their morals inside of professional wrestling?
No, I think it's each person's journey is their own, man. And I'm not going to name names, but I had 20 or 30 people that work there currently that said, like, it's just such an unbelievable choice and it's such a leader thing to do. Like, I'm doing it out of completely selfish reasons for myself and myself only. I'm not doing it to punish somebody. I'm not doing it to prove a point. I'm doing it because that's what I said when I got fired. That was not the case when I resigned, because I wouldn't have.
Right.
And then everything changed. I mean, in the end, I guess you could say joke's on me, because that person's not around anymore. And I'm willing to believe. I'm not willing to believe. I can give you 1,000% guarantee. If I wanted to work there, I could.
Right.
It's just at this point in my life, I'm just not interested, and I believe in what I'm doing, and that's worth more than almost anything to me right now. And it has nothing to do disparaging anything that goes on there. I still talk to Hunter this day. We're still buddies. I still have utmost respect for him and 95% of the people that work there, and especially the people that make the show go, and that's the people in the ring. And if that's what you want to do and that's your decision, then that's your decision. It was never about being a leadership or prove a point or that. I think some people took it that way, and some people like, man, it's it's really cool. In the end, it was a selfish reason, because I couldn't live with myself. Right? It's just as simple as that. I made a promise to myself and I kept it. So that was that.
And then you end up going back to TNA, and then recently some shit ends up hitting the fan. And there's, there was Impact, and they're doing the switch, and then boom, right after the switch, some of the biggest news in, Impact / TNA / Anthem history is they end up letting Scott go, a guy who has been the face, the staple, the glue, whatever you want to, call it, to TNA wrestling. Walk me through a little bit what was going through your mind when all of that was going down.
Yeah, obviously a shock. And, I've said this in other things. And Scott D'Amore is one of my dear friends. I had 30 people at my wedding, and he was one of them. And I've known him for over 30 years. And my friendship with him and my care for him and my love for him will never change, no matter what position he's in or any of that, right? That's got nothing to do with it. This is real life. Obviously, I knew long before a lot of people knew. At the time, I was shocked. I just shocked. I mean, like you said, the glue or whatever. TNA is not in the position that it's in now if it wasn't for Scott D'Amore. There's nobody more important over the last decade to its well-being, its resurgence, and its overall health than Scott D'Amore. I still believe he's one of the best in that position. I still think he could be doing it. That's a position that I'm not asked to make that decision. I can tell you that the people that are making the decisions now have been respectful, have been kind, have listened to things that I've had to say. Whether they follow through on those things, I don't know. And I'm not afraid to say those things. Me and them have a very open communication. And I would say things have gone as well as they could be at this point. But it was a massive shock to me. And a massive shock to the roster and all the stuff that happened after. And felt like the Dutch boy in the dam there for a little while. Me and Frankie and a couple of the guys. Like I've been through 10 or 12 of these, right? Where leadership there changes. But a lot of the people that are there, like a lot of the roster, have Scott's been the only person they've ever worked for. I get it, and a lot of people took it personally. I took it personally too. But in the end, it's business, and you're gonna lots of shitty things are gonna happen to you the longer you do this. In anything in life, it's just part of life, man. And I wish it didn't happen. Like I said, Scott's still one of my good friends. We talk often as we can, and he'll be fine. You know, he's got his hand in a million other things, and I think if he wanted to work in wrestling, he could. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I'll just say this is it was a massive shock. I was very let down by the decision, but over time have come to see that, it's what they believe is right. And in the end, they're the ones paying the bills, and they're the ones with their hands on the pulse of analytics and business expenditures and all this other stuff. I don't know that stuff. I don't concern myself with those things because it's got nothing to do with me. I got no say in any of that. Right. I show up on time to work. They give me what I'm going to do, and I nail that as hard as I can and work myself to the bone that day, and then come back and do it the next day. That's what I can control. And I think, as you get older, you realize you can just control the things that you can control. I can't control that. And if I could, Scott would still be in charge. But that's not the truth. And the guys that are in charge are excellent people, are hardworking people, seem to be honest. And I think most of all, Len Asperger, who's the owner of Anthem and Impact and TNA and all of it, stood up and just kind of said, like, I love this sport and I love this business, and this is going to go. And I believe him. Whether was lip service or not, I think we're all going to find out. But I believe him, and I wish it never happened for Scott. It sucks I don't get to see him as often as I did. But yeah, I mean, it floored everybody, man. It floored everybody. But it is onward and upward. And they also, they gave me the very distinct responsibility of kind of doing a pulse of the business kind of speech before New Orleans. We did it before we went on the air, but it aired on the internet everywhere. And those were also my words. I wrote every single one of them, and I meant every single one of them. And I wouldn't never say anything that I didn't mean in a position like that. If the cameras are rolled and they tell me to say something that I don't believe, yeah, I'm playing a character on a television show. None of it's real, know. But at that moment, I'm Jeremy Fritz. I'm not Eric Young. I'm just saying those people know me as Eric Young, but Jeremy Fritz is my real name, and I was Jeremy Fritz, just saying, like, look, guys, everything sucks, but we've been in this position before, and we're just going to get through it like we've always done it together, and that's what we're doing.
It's funny because shit is always going to happen. I tell people
100%.
It's always going to happen. It's how
inevitable.
You handle it. It's how you come out the other side of it. And the one thing that I've noticed about the TNA locker room is that they all were like, you know what? Okay, we have our initial blow up, which is going to happen. People get angry, people get mad, and emotions are like, what the fuck is going on everywhere, right? And I get all of that. But the internet and the media and the fucking stooge reports all sit there and they want to run with everything, right? Sure. Before there's even proof of whatever, you know what I mean? Yeah. Oh, a letter goes out in support of Scott. Okay, big deal. Yeah, absolutely did. But that's workers showing that, listen, we believe in our guy, and we want you to know that we believe in our guy.
That's it. That's business.
Yeah. Plain and simple, right?
Yep. I think that was held as professionally as we could. I think there was 8 or 9 of us, kind of all the people. And I don't know so much as I even consider myself. I'm not like a rah-rah, even though I was asked to do these speeches. Like, I'm not the rah-rah guy. I'm going to show up on time. I'm going to work my ass off, and I'm going to do what's right for the company and for the people that work there 100% of the time. And that's how I lead, right? Do you want to do what I'm doing? That's cool. If not, we're all our own business. None of us are employees of this company. The whole thing can disappear tomorrow. They can fire tomorrow for any reason. That's pro wrestling. It's just how it works, right? We're all in. We have to look out for ourselves, because the truth is, no matter what anyone says, no one is looking out for us except for ourselves. That's the world. Welcome to the real fucking world, right? Yeah. Right. That's the world. But yeah, I feel like we handled it as professionally. I think that they knew it was coming. I mean, Scott was not only a great boss, but beloved, as a mentor and a coach and a father figure and a confidant to tons of people, and still is, and will be, right? Like if I had some like real heavy life stuff, he'd be one of the people I call, and that won't change. That won't change. I love him, and I'm sitting here. Other than myself, there's nobody that I would thank more than him in my wrestling journey. Nobody. Scott D'Amore is the number one reason I've had success other than myself.
It's funny. Scott's a lot older than he actually is. Yeah, I say this to people.
Yes.
He's got such this fatherly aura about him to the company and to the people that he interacts with and stuff like that. But you're like, wait, Scott's only what? How old?
Yeah.
He's
only a few years older than me.
That's what I'm saying, right? Like it's crazy.
Yeah.
And
he's been that way for a long time, right? You've known him a long time too. Right? He's always been that way.
I'm probably one of the only people that still calls him Heavy D in his life.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's how long I've known Scott. And I appreciate everything that Scott, every interaction that we've ever had has always been fantastic. Don't have any problems with Scott whatsoever. And, I wish him nothing but the best. I hope that everything turns out for him. And I'm not worried about Scott. And nobody should be worried about Scott. He's going to do just fine, man.
Yeah.
Talk about passion. And I know for a fact that wrestling is the most passionate thing in your life, but you have other passions too.
Sure.
Like cigars,
yeah.
vinyl music, hockey, all of these things. Have you always been your entire life? Like if I'm into it, and I am 100% into it.
Yeah. And I think like I pick and choose the things that are really meaningful to me. Like, I have passion tattooed across my back. It says passion. A lot of people can't read it because it's all kind of jumbled up. But people ask me, what does it say? It's passion, love, freedom, respect. I'm not a religious person. I think if you are, that's fine. It's just not how I'm going to run my life. I've got my own sets of belief, and that's them. Under my right arm says fate. That's the other thing I believe in. Under my left arm says change, and on my back, small, but it's there. It says death because it chases us all. And those are the things I believe in. And nothing runs my life or dictates my decisions more than passion. I think I've proven that over time. And I'm not doing it to prove a point. I'm doing it because that's what gets me going. I said it earlier, like I love watching The Voice and American Idol and America's Got Talent. It makes me emotional because I'm watching people live their dreams. It's something I've been doing for 20 years, and this shit never gets old to me. Like it just never gets old. And watching people realize their dream in front of me makes me emotional because they're passionate about it. And I mean, I'd watch a documentary on knitting if someone was passionate about it. It's lifeblood for me. It's fuel. And I think it should be the number one driving force in everything that you do. And as long as you come from it that angle, nothing can be wrong. I believe that at my core. And that's why it's the top letter, top word on my back. It's the biggest, most prominent, and for me, the most important.
So did you have that passion when you were doing the fishing show? Was that all there where you were like, yeah, no, I really want to get in an inner tube and go fishing for sharks?
Yeah. I mean, so it turned as what's funny is I know me and you have talked about this. Like, I don't know anything about fishing. That's a pretty big letdown for a lot of people. Like I still get people send me pictures of fish they've caught, and like it's wild. It's over a decade ago. I had binge fishing before. It was a thing that me and my father did together. But I mean, up until that point, I probably hadn't been fishing in close to 15 years, and I was saddled. I'll also say this: the only thing real on television is pro wrestling. And I know I'm a pro wrestler, and this is a pro wrestling show. We're talking about pro wrestling, but it's the truth. As a person that's been behind the thing, everything else on TV that you're watching is made up.
Yeah.
All of it.
That's what I tell
single bit.
I tell people all the time. I go, you see that on TV? What you don't see is there's insurance policies taken out on every one of those people.
Every single one.
they have to have safety protocols and everything you see set
Yeah.
up before you do any of this stuff.
Yeah.
I love it. I love
Yeah.
it.
Lords of London out of the United Kingdom they'll insure you to do almost anything. And I found that out through the show. But what the passion that drove me is I wanted people to love the show. I wanted them to be interested in what we were doing and like watching it. And I had never been a television host. So I'm going into it being like, I want to be the best television host that I can be. And this show, I mean, obviously it's an easy gateway. I'm drinking beer and bullshit with these cool people that do this amazing stuff. And I mean, fishing stories, I can go toe to toe with any human being on earth. Caught a shark from a paddleboard. I jumped 100 foot off a cliff in Hawaii. I bit an octopus brain with my mouth. I've done all this crazy stuff, and I would do that all again tomorrow because I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie.
Yeah.
And the truth is the passion came from the crew and the people that I worked with were just these unbelievably talented human beings, and it was often the same guys on each show. So we became very close, still are very close to this day. And it was just about making the best television show that we could. And it did very well. We did, I didn't know anything about TV going into it. Like they greenlit it for 12 episodes, which never happens for a pilot season. Usually it's 6, sometimes 8, but they loved it so much they went right to 12. We were still shooting the first season when they re-upped for the second season. Amazing. So we went right basically from shooting the last episode. I think we had a month down and then straight back out to doing the second season. And I mean, it opened tons of doors. I stood on stage with Oprah Winfrey. I met Morgan Freeman. I was on Fox and Friends. I was on CNN. I was on ESPN. I did all this crazy stuff in a very short amount of time, and then did another show with Travel Channel. And then, like I was saying earlier, have a new vinyl record show that's going to come out on Access probably in October.
Talk to me about that.
Yeah, you're actually the first person. You're getting the exclusive. I haven't. It was they had planned on maybe doing it in April, but wanted to push it back. They apparently I haven't seen it yet, but all my responsibilities for it are done. It's basically I'm at a record shop. We did half the episodes here in Nashville, half the episodes in LA. A famous musician or comedian or actor will come into the shop that's also passionate about vinyl records. They go through and pick out their top 5, and then we break it down basically. And then after, I sit down and do a long form podcast with them, which is my favorite part. Basically hosting the show. I mean, I've got downstairs, I'm upstairs in my office right now, but downstairs I've got almost 2,500 vinyl albums I started collecting about 10 years ago. So it's something that I've always loved music. And like, what's cool for me is I can't play an instrument. I can't write a song. I can't read music. I don't know anything about music. The only thing I know, and for me, the only thing that matters is that I love it. I've loved it my whole life, and I'm passionate about it and listening to it and finding new music. And yeah, it became a complete addiction, and somehow parlayed it into another job. And hanging out with Bush or Gavin Rosdale from Bush, and Jeff Timmons from 98 Degrees, Sebastian Brock from Skid Row, who's a complete Canadian lunatic. And I cannot wait for people to see the show, man. It's so cool.
When's it coming out?
It'll come out in October, as far as I know.
All right. Well, we'll definitely be looking forward to that one. And I mean, you're living down in Nashville. Music has to bleed into your life. I mean, it's crazy.
Music City for sure. And I just had this unbelievable week of concerts. When I first moved here, I don't mind country music, but it's certainly not my favorite genre. And I was like, I'm going to be bashed over the head with country music. The truth is it's music of all kinds, right? Like, I mean, if you like live music, there isn't a better city probably anywhere in the world. Yeah. That's a bold statement, but I'm saying if you love live music, there isn't a better city with more variety on a Tuesday night. You could see any kind of band you want to see. And this past week we saw Black Crowes on Tuesday, which was, even if you don't even know who they are, just go. It was unbelievable. They were unbelievable. And then one of my favorite bands of all time, we were almost in the front row. Me and my wife were 10 feet away from the Black Pumas, which if you haven't listened to them, put it on the list, man. It's one of my favorite bands of all time.
All right. And I will say this about Nashville as well. One of my top 3 favorite flea markets in all of North America, dude. That
Nice.
thing is massive. And
Yeah.
I've been down there a couple of times for it. You know what I mean? And I love going there. The only problem is that I always fly down instead of drive down. So I can't take
Can
the
only
stuff
take so
home that I
much.
want. You know what I mean? It's fantastic.
Yeah, it can only take so much.
Eric, I want to ask you a couple of quick questions. Number one, and I don't
Sure.
know if we ever discussed this or not. How did you land on the name Eric Young?
Yeah, it's actually this is actually a funny story. I've said this on other podcasts, and some of the guys in Ontario would probably know. So Ronnie, boot guy Ronnie, they find that guy out in the middle of nowhere that makes historical boots. RD wrestling boots. There's pro wrestlers that had no idea that place, like the boots that he made me, was one of his first 5 pairs. So I was one of his first 5 pairs of boots he ever made. And certainly was not good at it when he first started, but got very good at it. And there was people all over the world wearing those boots. Like I was just in Europe in January and February of last year, and like I bet you I saw 100 different pairs of those boots. Some guys wearing them over there, and they're still wearing them. Yeah. So, anyways, we're in the van, and there's a bunch of us, 4 or 5 of us going. And this is 1997, 1998, somewhere in there. So like you didn't use your real name. Nobody used their real name, especially if you were just some indie guy, right? Like you weren't supposed to be yourself. You were supposed to be something else, right? So, we're coming up with names, and everybody else, that 3 or 4 other guys in the van are like, they're all just going to get black boots. I was like, no way, that's boring. First of all, I'm going to get my initials on the side because Ric Flair has his initials on the side. And I want to have black and white ones with the white sole and the white tongue like Owen had. I loved his boots. Always loved his boots, so I wanted to have a version of Owen Hart's boots. And we're throwing around names and like this, that, and the other. And if you remember Columbia House, that was still a thing at the time. It's basically a Ponzi scheme that everybody had. I mean, you had it, I had it, my wife had it. I mean, everybody our age had it. 30 CDs for $1. How do I say no? Well, they didn't tell you about the $50 CDs that you got to buy after that. So and you have to wait 12 weeks to get them in the mail. Yeah. And they'd send you those little cards in the mail. And if you didn't fill it out and send it back, they would just send you whatever the selection of the month was. So if it was like, greatest hits of Celine Dion, no disrespect to Celine Dion, one of the greatest singers of all time, but I'm not interested in owning her CD. Right. I'm just not interested in it. I'm interested in it now, be added to my collection, but back then, not really. So that week, that month, it could have been the month before, it was just in the van. On the floorboards of this van, it was classic rock, and there was an Eric Clapton and a Neil Young CD side by side, and that's literally how it happened.
Amazing. It's amazing. You're the second person that's ever brought up the old Columbia House thing, because on the show, the first being myself. Right. Because I can't tell you, like it was, you glue tape the penny to the thing and send in for your 9 or whatever it was selections. And I went Chris Tidwell. I went C. Tidwell. I went Christopher Lee. Okay. I went C.L. Tidwell. Like I had so many free CDs, you know what I mean? Because it was then you just go to the post office box and go like, they must have got it wrong. Give me my box. I'm out of here. Right? Yep. I can't imagine why Columbia House went out of business.
It's close to my name. It must have been a mistake. I'll just take it.
Absolutely. All right. I'm going to run down some names from you. Yep. And I want to get your reaction on these names. Just tell me what comes to your mind right out the gate. First one I'm going to throw at you, Danny Bonaducci.
Brilliant lunatic.
Kurt Angle.
Brilliant lunatic. True. And I would say, just one of the kindest human beings I've met. Yeah, very good guy.
Jeff Jarrett.
Mentor, father, friend.
Sting.
Icon, period.
Did you enjoy your time spent with him?
Dude, as a kid that idolized him, he would have been in my top 5 for sure. I would call him Steve, just because I thought it was funny.
Right.
And I think he liked it, right? Like I didn't call him Stinger. I don't.
Sure.
His name's Steve, so I call him Steve.
Yeah.
And he was always so complimentary of me and cool with me, and being able to be like friends. And like right near the end of my WWE run is when they had him come back there for a bit. And it was surfaced a couple of months ago on the internet. It was me, Jeff, and Sting all standing talking. We're all laughing. It was right around ringside, probably laughing about how I was probably not doing anything that night, but I could laugh at it.
Hey, catering's still good, right?
Excellent.
Bring us some Tupperware containers. You're good for the week.
I'm not saying I didn't.
Everybody did. Crazy Steve.
Passionate, talented, nuts.
He's got an eye for the business.
100%. Yeah.
Sean Spears.
2 eyes. Natural.
I'm going to throw one out there that not many people know, but you and I both know. Tiberius King, JT Playa.
Legendary performer, legendary human being. Just, I mean, you know what's going on, and it stinks. And it's just unfair, man. It's just unfair. And, you know, cancer is going to touch everybody. It's taken several people from me already, and this is another one that's going to take. And it's just unfair in every way. I could name 20 people off the top of my head, me included, that should have it before he does.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that 100%. Scott D'Amore.
Friend, genius.
And finally, Eric Young.
I don't know. Not a massive horn tutor. I think if I would want someone to say something, I would say respect. And for me, that's everything. You know, like
you don't ever have to worry about business. You'll never have to worry about any of that.
Well, I appreciate that, man.
Because one thing that I will say is, for as long as you and I have known each other, yes, you always have been a level up on everybody that you're around. You've always carried yourself with the utmost of professionalism at all times, except for maybe in the wrestler house.
I only visited the wrestler house. But I had a couple sideways evenings there. That's for sure.
Yes. And I mean, hey, I'll never forget. The show across the street in Cambridge, Ontario, at the arena that Hayden Avery, hippie, had put on. And then, if I'm not mistaken, you were the champ at the time, and you had to drop the belt. You had to drop the belt to Larry Destiny was dropping the belt to you.
That's right.
If I'm not mistaken. And that was the belt. That was the infamous end of that company's run, because some asshole decided to draw all over the belt before it went out there.
Some special members only.
Absolutely. Listen, Showtime, I love you to death. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it more than you'll know. This is the Law Live Audio Wrestling. Where can people get a hold of you if they want to stalk you?
Yeah, the Eric Young on Twitter or X, or I don't know, whatever the hell it's called. And the Eric Young IG on Instagram. Look, I'm bad at them, mostly by design, because I'm not a big fan. I do what I can to keep up with people and stay in contact with people, but I'm not good. If I don't see your thing or I miss your message, it's nothing personal. I'm just busy living my life and doing something cool with my dogs and my wife, and doing something that's worthwhile rather than being on social media.
Isn't that what it's all about?
It is.
It is fantastic. Eric Young, thank you once again for joining us here on the Law. TID's Kick in the Head. For all the rest of you, stay right there. We're going to come back. We're going to wrap this whole thing up in a nice little bow. We'll be right back after this.